and it may not be full of grandeur, and it may not be full of glory, and you may feel like you're unprepared. But if God has called you and God has equipped you, you just simply need to be living for God. And when He opens the door, you say, "Yea, Lord, your servant hears." You see, I serve at the pleasure of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I've always done what I've been asked to do. Church, God has spoken to some of you here in this room at times, and you've never made a move to try to do what you feel like God has called you to do. Some of you, maybe you're just kind of hanging on the edges and saying, "Okay, Lord, I want to give myself to that completely." Just understand this morning, God, if He calls you and He's equipped you, you will never be happy until you reach that place. Just Candy, I know you got your break. You pass the load to Nathan. You might come to the piano just for a minute. Why don't you stand with me right now? One more story, and then I close. It'll be a short one. My neighbor and pastor, when I was in Illinois, started a church. It was the church he was a part of went south, and the church split up, and he ended up pastoring a group of 30-some people, and not one single musician in the midst of them. And Brother Kelly Wilson said he played the songs at their first worship service on the keyboard. Casey, one finger at a time. He said, "I learned 3 songs." And we played those for quite a while. I learned another one. I learned another one. Today, if you went there, he's probably on the platform now. Half the time sitting behind a keyboard just because he enjoys it. He didn't know he had a gift in there. It was laying latent. He had been used in other things. And suddenly, something terrible happened. And God said, "Okay, now, you need to step up." Was he embarrassed about the way it was getting? Yeah. He said, "We didn't sing any fast songs." He says, "You can't do a fast song if you got one finger on the keyboard and nobody playing drums." He said, "You just do the best you can do, worship God and have church." But you know what? They're running a couple of hundred today. They're right in the heart of town. And God blessed because they were willing to do what they could. Church, I'm here to tell you this morning. Maybe God's spoken to you at some point. You say, "God, I'm really not so sure that I'm equipped that way." Maybe you've got an equipment that has just been buried up by all the stuff in this world. Maybe God's just need to pull some things back from you. Maybe you need to lay some things aside so that God can uncover a calling in your heart this morning. Can I tell you something? If you are called this morning to preach the gospel, you know, it doesn't matter that we're a big church or a little church. These Stone King, with most known names in Pentecost Day, got the Holy Ghost in a little church like ours. Whether it's a big church or a little church, doesn't really matter. Because it's the big God that does the calling. And can I tell you something, ladies? You may end up being a missionary someday. You may end up teaching a Sunday school class for years. And those kids will come back to you years down the road and they'll thank you for something that you did. But you know, many times it's just going to be a bunch of snotty-nosed brats that don't want to pay attention, don't want to listen. But you'd be amazed at what you put into it. You just do it because of God. Because God called everybody. And in carrying out that call, those of us who are already in it, He calls to try to tell others. If God's called you this morning to a ministry, if God's called you to serve, minister and serve according to the abilities that God has given you, do it with gladness. Don't do it with regret or with, "Oh, I wish I didn't have to do this." Can I tell you something? There's no greater joy or satisfaction than being right where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing. I could have gone to many different scriptures this morning. I could have preached about the need to get your life ready and walk worthy of the vocation that you're called in. I could have talked about other scriptures. I just wanted to talk to you this morning. God's got a calling for you here this morning. And if you're called to a pulpit ministry, I'm not going to, you know what? I'm not going to do what my pastor did. But I tell you what I would recommend to you. You need to get a hold of God. But you know what? If you're called to a singing ministry, you need to get a hold of God. If you're called to a children's ministry, you need to get a hold of God. If you're called to the temple care, house cleaning, hospitality, outreach, I can go on and rattle off departments of the church. Whatever your ministry that you're called to, whatever you're equipped for this morning, church, you need to get a hold of God. But just let me tell you this morning, there's no higher place, higher honor, I should say, nor humbling experience than to look back and realize that God has used you in spite of your mistakes. And God has got His hand on you. Young person, young people, young adults, hear me this morning. Your lives are ahead of you. You're still shaping and forming the dash. What are you going to do with it? What are you